Live from the TV30 studio, here is Jim Schneider.
Well, good evening and welcome to inFocus here on Channel 30. We're so glad that you've joined us here as we embark each Monday evening to keep you informed on critical issues. Rebroadcast taking place on midnight and Tuesday at early in the morning as well as at 12 noon to keep you informed on critical issues that are impacting us here in our state. And friends, there's been a whole lot that's happened. Just 1 week ago today, we saw Donald Trump inaugurated as the 47th President of the United States of America. Lots of change took place virtually immediately through the executive actions that he has taken on so many different fronts. Also here in the state of Wisconsin, a new legislative session has gotten underway as well. And just recently, Tony Evers, governor of Wisconsin, issued his State of the State address. We'll be talking about that. In addition, friends, we've got a very critical election, two elections, both a primary and a general election this spring that we want to inform you about as well. Joining us here for inFocus, we welcome back Daniel Degner, president of Wisconsin Family Council. Daniel, good to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jim, and I send my greetings from our President Emeritus Jillian Appling as well as our legislative director Sam Krebs, who's unable to be with us today because he's on paternity leave.
Oh, wonderful. Well, congratulations to Sam and to your team there. And we've got a whole lot to unfold here this evening. First of all, looking just a week ago, we had Donald Trump giving his inaugural address, and very stirring inaugural. There are many commentators saying this is one of the best inauguration addresses that had ever been given across this nation, and very impactful for immediate change. What do you see as being most significant in this change in the presidency?
Yeah, well, I will say for Jillian Appling and I, we just stood up. We were excited when we were watching the inauguration. And President Donald Trump said, in America now, there will only be two genders, male and female. And that's the exact type of leadership that we need to have, not just in America as our U.S. president, but also here in Wisconsin. We'd love to have a governor that would have that same viewpoint. But it's encouraging to see this diversity, equity, inclusion, which really isn't diversity, equity, inclusion to people like you and I with biblical worldview, but really is a far-left propaganda machine. To see that Trump is heavily attacking that and saying that that has no place in our U.S. military as well as our federal government. But the one thing I would say when it comes to the inauguration is we can be super excited. It is great that President Trump is serving again. It is great that we have a leader who will have an open voice as well as an open ear to biblical worldview and Christian beliefs. But we need to remember that the most important place where things happen right now is the state level. And so yes, it's great that Trump is serving at that federal level, but we need to make sure we make an impact here in the state level, even going into the Supreme Court election.
Daniel, one of the situations that happens to many is they feel satisfied. Okay, we have somebody who's changing the direction of this nation, and the alarm is still going off, and they keep hitting the snooze button. We don't need to be awake or alert anymore, but now more than ever, staying astute as to what's going on in our local communities, our state, and the nation is very critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really easy for us if we're just watching national news outlets to just think the national place is the only thing where stuff is happening. Just a couple weeks ago, I spoke at a Sanctity of Life Sunday service, and I had a lady that came up to me and she said, "Isn't it great now we're going to have President Trump inaugurated and everything's going to be perfect on the pro-life issue?"
My.
And I had to remind her that because of our liberal state Supreme Court, and because of a liberal judge in Dane County, that abortion is legal in Wisconsin right now through the 5th month of pregnancy. And we'll talk about the state of the state later, but even Governor Evers said he will demand that we continue to have abortion through that 5th month of pregnancy, and he'd even like to see it further beyond. We still have a lot we need to do on these issues at the state level.
Yeah, and so many states are doing that, just casting votes, and Virginia most recently passing a constitutional amendment proposal for the state to allow abortion up to the point of birth, and it's horrifying to see what's happening. But one thing that we're seeing under the Trump administration as well is the reestablishment of the rule of law, something that's been disregarded.
Oh, absolutely, especially whether you're looking at the border or you're looking at just other areas. We saw during the Biden administration that the rule of law wasn't something that was really upheld and wasn't kept, and it definitely will be encouraging to see that now there will be a new attorney general that we'll see where really America goes back to the rule of law and really goes in and follows the laws that Congress passes.
And the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, who has been grilled, has indicated that she is not going to be targeting pro-life centers and pro-lifers as we saw under Merrick Garland.
Yeah, and absolutely. Speaking of that too, it was encouraging to see that President Trump, one of the first things he did was he pardoned those that the DOJ did target, those pro-life protesters, those pro-life prayer warriors that are outside these clinics that the DOJ politically attacked and even pressed charges against them. That right away Trump made it very clear that that is no longer going to happen in his administration.
You mentioned the borders, and that is a huge, huge impact. I mean, immediately, and I was watching video, what happened within a minute of the inauguration. I mean, the Border Patrol was just a complete different persona at the border, and so anybody who crosses here illegally is going to be arrested. We have seen, the faucet, the spigot shut off right now as to the illegal flow that we have observed over the past 4 years.
Yeah, and for us too, we would say that, of course, as Christians, we want to support those who are coming here legally, who are coming here under the right mindset, especially if they want to get back to our country, and especially if they're Christians. But those that are coming here illegally, they need to go through those proper channels.
Indeed. As you mentioned, striking back at the DEI initiatives, a lot of firing taking place, and DEI is not going to be the law of the land, so to speak, as it comes through the federal bureaucracy.
Yeah, and even it was encouraging to see that that Coast Guard leader that was leading the Coast Guard, that was having extensive DEI initiatives throughout our military, that was one of the first things Trump did as well, was he fired her, and also ensured for our federal government that if there's anything even under a different guise or a different name that's not diversity, equity, inclusion, to report it to the Trump administration, and they will make sure they address it right away.
And the other thing, as you mentioned, Daniel, is the matter of the declaration. As far as the federal government is concerned, there are only two genders, male and female. I mean, one has to scratch our head how we even got to this point, but praise the Lord that he's recognized the biblical aspect. Genesis, God created male and female, and that is recognized now through the Trump administration.
Yeah, and I think it says a lot too to what laws impact and how they impact culture. I just think back every day when we're in our office, I look at a newspaper clipping of the 2006 marriage amendment vote, and I'm reminded that even here in Milwaukee County, we saw people voted for marriage between a man and a woman. But even if you would take those same polling today, how far away it is, but it's even got to the point where we're in this gender confusion.
Yeah, a lot of that going on, and it's being propagated through the education system here, not only across the nation, but right here in Wisconsin that is going on, and so much that is taking place and the governor is not helping in this. We'll talk about state of the state in just a moment, but we really have got to come to grips. I mean, so often we hear, follow the science. Well, basic biology tells us there are two genders, and it's male and female.
Yeah, from the moment of conception, we find out whether someone has the XX chromosomes or they have an XY chromosome, making them a man or making them a woman. And unfortunately, for so long, we've heard the left tell us that we need to follow the science, follow the science. But when it comes to this transgender confusion, they refuse to listen to the science.
Daniel, are you, Wisconsin Family Council, are you optimistic toward the future of this nation?
I would say we are optimistic towards the future of this nation, but with that, we're optimistic for the future of what churches in Wisconsin as well as our nation can do. We know that we cannot win our culture battles and our culture wars purely just through politics, even though politics is an important piece of that. But truly, it's through the gospel proclamation in local churches around our state and around our nation as people are transformed with the transformative work of Jesus Christ in their lives.
So the most important issue is not who is at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, it's who's in your heart.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Daniel Degner with us tonight, president of Wisconsin Family Council, and you're watching inFocus here on Channel 30. And tonight, a new legislative session has begun. We're talking about those issues. Just 1 week ago, we had the inauguration take place of Donald Trump, 47th president of the United States. And we're now going to take a look here at Wisconsin as well, because there's a lot going on within our state. And the closer that government comes down to us, I mean, that's the greatest impact that we have, a state government and then our local municipal governments as well. Daniel, let's take a look at Wisconsin. New legislative session is underway, and it's a new makeup of our state assembly and state senate. Yeah,
and I would say the maps that the courts threw onto the legislature this last session really made a huge impact. We went from having 64 Republicans in the state assembly and 35 Democrats in the state assembly to now 54 Republicans and 45 Democrats. So a change of 10% of the state assembly. In the state senate, we saw 22 Republicans and 11 Democrats, and now we have 18 Republicans and 15 Democrats. And so there's definitely been a huge change when it comes to our legislature, and that will make a huge impact in what sort of legislation we can even pass this upcoming session as well.
Okay, and even 2 years from now in November, there are those, the Democratic Party is looking to take over at least one of the chambers.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The state Senate's going to be a very tight race coming into this next legislative session. There's really 3 key battleground seats, and one of them's in the Milwaukee outskirts towards Brookfield in that area. But Republicans need to retain 2 of these 3 toss-up districts in order to maintain the legislative majority in the Senate.
Last Wednesday night, Governor Evers delivered his State of the State address, and took several notes here that I want to run by you. Number one, the thing that hit me is that he took credit for a budget surplus here in the state of Wisconsin, not mentioning that he provided a budget to the legislature that was going to take spending through the roof, but it's the Republican legislature that said, no, we're not going that direction. They're the ones that provided the budget that he eventually signed.
Yeah, and I had to laugh at the irony. I remember last session when these bills came forward, I remember the governor saying we need to have tax cuts for people like teachers and those that aren't making a whole lot of money, and then he turned around and he actually vetoed tax cuts for those that were making over $28,000 a year. Mm-hmm. And so we just see again and again that the legislature is giving these tax cuts. They're trying to support families. And ultimately the governor is vetoing them. I listened to the response of the State of the State from Speaker Voss yesterday, and it was interesting to hear that the reason we had this $4 billion surplus in the first place is because Governor Evers vetoed a tax cut that would have given every Wisconsin family an extra $1,000 of their hard-earned money they paid in taxes.
And I know there's going to be a budget address coming up very soon, and the budget's going to be presented. A lot of battle lines are being drawn for that. But talking more about the State of the State, he also talked about his desire to really strike at our state's Constitution's Second Amendment and putting in things like universal background checks and red flag laws. I mean, the background checks would even, if a dad passes a gun on to a son or something of that nature, it would trigger background checks and everything else that would have to be triggered as a result.
Yeah, and just thinking of that part of it, it felt very Biden-esque. He actually talked about the Second Commandment instead of the Second Amendment right away. But I will say he did bring up the Abundant Life shooting, and we are deeply mourning. We are deeply hurt by that shooting. And we pray for those families, and we want to mourn with those families. But also, I think it's unfortunate when we politicize this and we say that the answer to shootings like that is let's pass gun control laws, because there's not one gun control law that would have stopped that horrible, horrific shooting. Really, our focus needs to be in how do we help stabilize families throughout Wisconsin?
Right.
How do we help build in the families? Because if there was stable family units, we wouldn't have the sort of violence issues that we have in our state.
It really goes back to that heart issue, doesn't it?
Yep, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Another matter he talked about last Wednesday evening at the State of the State, he said he would fight against those who are trying to repeal Obamacare. Now, that's a federal thing that went through, but he's going to make his efforts to fight against those who want to change that system.
Yeah, I just think it goes again to, unfortunately, these speeches aren't necessarily about how do we actually do what's best for the state or how do we pass good policy. But this is just another example of just trying to really beat a dead horse with some of these issues that really aren't even an issue in Wisconsin, but even at the federal level, it'd be very unlikely for that to be overturned.
Daniel, as he spoke, he also made no bones about his place in being a backer of abortion. And he spoke of his unwavering support for reproductive rights. He fights for what he calls safe, legal abortion. Safe, legal abortion, knowing that there's always a fatality. It's not safe. Abortion always requires a fatality to take place. He said that he would veto any bill that comes in opposition to abortion. And we know that just last week we marked the 52nd anniversary of Roe v. Wade as well. More than 66.4 million babies have been killed since that Roe decision of 1973. And putting that out, that is 10 times the population, more than 10 times the population of the state of Wisconsin. 20% of our U.S. population, and he calls it safe legal, but he's going to do everything to see that the child killing continues.
Yeah, and what I thought was interesting about this, and we're really glad the governor said that 2025 is going to be the year of the kid. And we want to support kids in our state, and we believe that's the best way to do that is through a foundational, strong family unit. That's why we're really excited. We think that this age verification law that will ensure minors cannot access illicit materials online will be a great way to address this as well. But what's really interesting with it being the year of the kid, he's also very clear that it is not the year for the unborn children and the unborn kids. And so we would,
really ironic. I mean, saying
Yeah.
that this is the year of the, and he used the kid, not the year of the child, but the year of the kid he talked about, and yet he had just finished talking about abortion and being able to kill babies in the womb.
Yep, and not just that, but right now in Wisconsin, there's abortion happening through the first 5 months of the pregnancy. And Evers was very crystal clear that 5 months wasn't enough, that he would continue to fight to ensure that we even go beyond 5 months for abortion here in Wisconsin.
That begs the question, we have our 1849 law. It seems very clear that banned abortion. Where does that sit right now?
Yeah, so unfortunately, we had our pre-roll law, which is statute 94004, and so that only allowed for abortion in cases where the mother's life was in jeopardy. And so what happened was there was a Dane County court case and a Dane County judge that unfortunately made a decision that said this actually wasn't referring to abortion, but it was referring towards infanticide, which really the legal opinion on that was just a really terrible, bad legal opinion. So that case was referred up.
I think he was talking feticide?
Yep, feticide. Yep, and so now this case is referred up to the Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court, not the U.S. Supreme Court. The state Supreme Court has already heard the case on this and heard the merits. We're really concerned that they would throw out this pre-roll law, the 94004. But even bigger concern for us is the state Supreme Court is also waiting to hear a case from Planned Parenthood that make abortion a constitutional right here in Wisconsin.
Right.
And the irony with that is the language they're using is because we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
So what they're saying makes people happy to kill a baby?
Absolutely. Their argument is that the pursuit of happiness means that it is okay to take a human life.
My. Well, friends, continue to be praying regarding this before the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Really, it would take a miracle, and the Lord at work in the hearts of the justices here in the state of Wisconsin, 7 Supreme Court justices. There's an election coming up. We're going to tell you about that, too, in just a moment. Talking more about the State of the State speech, he also voiced opposition to President Trump's immigration processes as well, referring to those who have broken the law by, illegally entering our country, our state. And yes, though we are a nation built on immigrants, there's a difference between legal immigration and illegal immigration.
Yeah, absolutely. And the concern that I would have too as we look at what President Trump is doing is President Trump isn't going after each and every person who's entered the country illegally. He is going after those who are hardened, violent criminals. And so for the governor as well as the police chief in Beloit and even in other areas to say that we aren't going to remove these hardened, violent criminals from our communities, it doesn't make any sense, because the biggest thing that we should be focused on is how do we protect and keep our communities safe. And just thinking about protecting our communities and keeping kids safe, I just think too I was amazed with the governor last week when we had this State of the State. He was very clear that he will veto any bill that would make it so that minors in Wisconsin cannot get transgender surgeries.
Yeah.
And just talk about how much that impacts it really makes it so kids aren't protected here in our state, and we were just amazed with that. But he also said he would veto bills that would protect women's sports and ensure the safety of women in sports.
Yeah, again, it's so ironic, talking out of both sides of his mouth in this regard, and even talking when he talks about that veto any bill that will make us less inclusive. Look what's happening in corporate America across the country. They are turning their back on this DEI agenda right now. Corporation after corporation after corporation, and governments are saying, we're putting that behind us no longer.
Yeah, he definitely did not get the message of what the voters in Wisconsin, but also throughout America said this last November. And unfortunately, if he continues to be so hard on these issues and continues to say he'll be an advocate for ensuring transgender surgeries happen on minors, that will definitely be a potential sticking point in the next election.
Repeatedly, he said this phrase, and it caught my attention as well: we must do better than nothing. We must do better than nothing, and blaming the Republican majority for doing nothing. Now, they have put forth a whole lot of bills in the last legislative session, but he veto.
Yeah, and if I recall right, the last session, I believe, or maybe it was 2 sessions ago, was the largest number of vetoes we've ever had by any governor in the state of Wisconsin. But even with that, I've had meetings with leadership of the state assembly and the state senate. And one of the things that's really unfortunate is the governor won't pick up phone calls from these members of leadership of the legislature. He refuses to meet with them. And so how do we expect for government to work together well if the leader of our state refuses to meet with those that are leading the state legislature.
Just putting conclusion to the state of the state, here's a statement that came from the MacIver Institute. They said this: tonight was the governor's 7th state of the state, but he was still talking about issues that should have been solved in his first term. Last year was supposed to be the year of the worker, but families are continuing to struggle to make ends meet. Now this year is the year of the kid. The year of the kid in 2025 will not create safe learning environments when we do the same old thing budget after budget. Administration grow, budgets bloat, and kids suffer. He said, in reality, Governor Evers is prioritizing illegal immigrants, red flag laws, and more money for teachers, unions, instead of creative, forward-thinking solutions that offer Wisconsin a positive path forward to a better future of increased opportunity and prosperity for our state. The bottom line is this: it's just not working.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that statement from MacIver. And even going off of that, too, thinking of the year of the kid, we have seen time and time again that Tony Evers' successor, Jill Underly, as our Department of Public Instruction superintendent, has lowered and lowered and lowered the standards of our testing, which is just showing it's just a way to try to hide how education in public schools throughout our state is failing our kids.
Daniel Degner with us here tonight from Wisconsin Family Council. And Daniel, we're going to have you back next week because we're going to talk more about the agenda that you're focusing on here for this term and what's going on within our legislature. But I don't want this program to be completed until we talk about some important dates that we've got coming up. We've got a primary election just weeks away, less than a month away, as well as a general election. So tell us what's going on.
Yeah, so there'll be a primary statewide for State Superintendent of Public Instruction. That will be on February 18th. We encourage you to vote early if you're able to vote early in person or by mail, but also vote no later than 8 p.m. on February 18th for that position. And then the general election will be on April 1st. The February 18th election that's coming right up, the primary, your local municipalities may also have a primary as well, but everyone in the state will have the DPI superintendent
Okay,
race.
so that will be one universal thing on every ballot, whether you're in Milwaukee, Kenosha, Ashland, Wisconsin. Yep. It's going to be on there, the State Superintendent of Public Instruction. How critical is this seat?
I would say it's absolutely critical. We're seeing time and time again that this office is really combating school choice. They're not working with Christian schools around our state, and they're even trying to throw Christian schools under the bus. We really need to have someone in that office that does not support this far left transgender ideology, but also understands that if we make education better for every kid, regardless of public school, homeschool, or private school, it makes it better for Wisconsin.
Now, there are 3 candidates vying for this?
Yep, there are 3 candidates vying for this role. You have the Jill Underly, who's the incumbent. She's endorsed by the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. You have Jeff Wright, who is endorsed by the far left Liberals Teachers Union. And then you have Brittany Kinzer, who has some experience when it comes to charter schools here in Milwaukee.
Okay, has been accepting of the charter school, choice school movement?
Correct. Charter schools here in Milwaukee.
Okay. So the thing that disturbed me too, last week we received a story indicating that Planned Parenthood, which is receiving quite a setback from the Trump administration now, but they have a tactic of which they are really getting engaged in local school board elections, putting forth candidates that will carry the water for Planned Parenthood. And many times people think, oh, it's just a school board candidate or just somebody in charge of education in the state of Wisconsin. These are really critical because that ideology is going to come down through textbooks, curricula, in classroom instruction.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason they would support those candidates is they want to ensure that their people are the ones that are promoting the human growth and development curriculum. They want to make sure that they are promoting birth control. They want to make sure that they're promoting abortion, that they're promoting all these things so that when these young men and young women do end up in those crisis situations, that they go to Planned Parenthood to be referred for abortion. But really, we need to have people that follow the rule of law and promote abstinence as the main key, but also teach things like our success sequence in Wisconsin, where we encourage people to graduate high school, to get married, have a full-time job, and then have kids.
Friends, again, February 18th is the primary here in the state of Wisconsin, and this primary will narrow the field of candidates for the April general election. So the one statewide race is for the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, but as Daniel mentioned here, there may be other things. You may have contested school board seats in which there are more than 2 candidates, other municipal positions that you're voting on. Some of you may have referenda questions that may appear on this ballot as well. So the best way, go to the state's website, go to myvote.wi.gov, myvote.wi.gov, and click on the button, What's on my ballot? You'll put in your address, and then your ballot will come up so you can see the races that you're actually voting on during this February 18th primary. But friends, don't let this primary pass with not your participation. Sometimes it's 8, 9, 10% turnout, and that's it. Majority of voters, over sometimes 90% or more, stay home during such the spring primary. So be engaged. Now, Daniel, you mentioned this is going to set the stage for the April election, which is on April 1st this year. That has a very, very critical statewide seat that is on it.
Oh, absolutely. We've already seen what this liberal-leaning state Supreme Court has done the last year and a half. And if this is the last opportunity that conservatives have to take the court back until 2028, if conservatives do not win this race on April 1st, we're going to see a total deconstruction of all the things that happened under the Scott Walker era.
Mm-hmm. So 2 candidates running for this seat.
Yep, there's 2 candidates. You have Brad Schimmel, who served as the Attorney General, who is Republican under Scott Walker's administration. Then you also have Susan Crawford, who has served as a previous attorney for groups like Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin, as well as been an attorney that fought against voter ID in Wisconsin.
So again, friends, that election will be coming up on April the 1st. And again, a very critical election that we're facing here in the state of Wisconsin. And there are going to be a statewide referendum question on that ballot as well.
Yep, and the statewide referendum question will be on voter ID. And so especially with the concerns of what will this court continue to do to go against our Constitution, go against the legislative authority, this is the best opportunity for us to enshrine and ensure that a liberal state Supreme Court in the future cannot get rid of voter ID here in Wisconsin.
Okay, because that would put it right in our state constitution.
Yep.
And so the argument people are making, well, it's already the law in the state of Wisconsin. Why do you have to put it in the Constitution? And we've seen what the Supreme Court has done to various laws.
Yep. Unless things are very clear and put in our state constitution, we've seen this court time and time again and said, well, it doesn't matter if it's not clear and put in the Constitution. We're just going to make whatever law we want to make out of it, and we're going to say that it's unconstitutional because we feel like it. And so we really need to make sure that we enshrine this in the Constitution so that if this race doesn't go our way now, but even 10, 15, 20 years from now, if there's ever a liberal majority in the state Supreme Court, that voter ID is maintained in our state Constitution, but it's also something that's supported by more than 80% of Wisconsinites.
Daniel, we have just a minute left, but your organization, Wisconsin Family Council, that you're president, you're there to keep people informed and churches informed on these critical issues.
Yeah, absolutely. We had just a really exciting, encouraging time when it came to the November election. We had 1,014 churches around the state that utilized our election resources, and we had over 10 callers that called all these churches around the state, evangelical churches specifically. And we're excited that we're going to be able to redo that for this April election because we know what's at stake and how important it is for churches. And so if your church is looking for resources, they want to get involved, we encourage you to go to our website, wifamilycouncil.org.
Daniel, thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Again, Daniel Degner with us. Let me repeat that web address, wifamilycouncil.org, wifamilycouncil.org. You can also reach out to them by phone. Their number 1-888-378-7395. And be engaged, and friends, get on their list, get their emails, updates, and get behind and support them as well. Friends, they're really keeping us informed on these critical issues. Daniel will be back with us again next week. Thanks for joining us here on TV 30's inFocus. May you have a very pleasant good evening. Good night.